What is important that underpinning those three pathways, there is a necessity to invest in underlying information intermediation systems, systems of recognition of prior learning, systems of micro-credentials, job matching platforms to make sure that people who go through these skilling pathways actually get to a job, because skilling is not really resulting in any outcome unless it's really resulting in a job. And the proposition that we're making from the side of the World Bank Group now is to see how can we deploy those solutions, those four solutions as a package across different sectors, different value chains. We need to explore how we can embed these skilling solutions in the Mission 300, in AgriConnect, in investments in tourism, in mining, in health. And if you look at the big platforms, the M300, the AgriConnect, and others, they do identify skilling as an entry point. But it's really important that we think about skilling from the get-go. It's not an afterthought. A talent strategy of any major investment is needed at the very beginning. And so, just to give an example, this is the Inga hydropower dam in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the authorities identified the need to focus on skilling and making sure that there is a workforce that can be matched to the jobs that are going to be created through the skill investment. And so there's a component in that big program that focuses on creating the Inga Academy. The Inga Academy is going to deliver engineers, technicians that are needed for the operation of the hydropower dam. But the extension of this can go to any other sector. It can go to mining, it can go to tourism. Think about the needs, the diverse skill needs of the development of the Benito corridor. We talked about economic corridors, I think it was yesterday. And so there is a railroad development that will require thousands of railroad operators that don't exist at the moment. So it's a strategy to import railroad operators from abroad, from where we want to import railroad operators. It's about creating a credible local talent pipeline that is there because we have a visibility over 20, 30 years in terms of the needs of the investments that are being made today. So thinking about embedding skilling in these major development priorities is the direction in which we need to go. So to basically then sum up, it's important to think about the solutions around the foundations on early childhood development, on primary and secondary education. And from the side of the World Bank in Southern and Eastern Africa, we have a multi-phase approach operation that is called the Aim for Learning operation, which is about really rolling out that innovative platform on learning in the classroom, taking success in the classroom system-wide across countries in East and Southern Africa. And then on the skills for jobs, these four solutions that I mentioned are embedded in an MPA, a multi-phase approach operation that we have in East Africa, which is called the Set for Jobs, as well as a similar operation in West Africa, it's called the CIRA platform that is just getting going. And really, what's important to recognize that these solutions coming together in an integrated way, they are the ones that deliver more and better jobs. So let me stop here and leave you with this slide that has a QR code linked to our Human Capital Index Plus, which is an index that measures human capital for every country in the world. And it allows you to download an app. And that app permits you to compare human capital in your country against other countries, neighboring countries, countries in a similar group of income per capita, but also maybe aspirational peers. And look at the different elements of human capital, how they relate to the growth pathway of your country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, for that very, very excellent presentation. You have done well in setting the pace and the stage actually for this discussion. And your last but one slide. So I like this one with the QR code. I hope colleagues will be using the code now to look at where the country stands in terms of human capital. But the summary of what you presented is that early childhood development is important. We need to look at how we can expand access, improve quality, and how our intervention side. Secondly, the primary and secondary education also needs to be improved to make it more effective, to actually enhance the teaching and the quality of the outcomes, which is the quality of outcomes. And thirdly, that technical and vocational education is required to meet the needs, the skill needs of today. And we need to look at how we can expand that and mainstream that actually with educational training of our children to meet the labor market needs of today. But we need to also look at how we can embed our youth into firms, into industry, to learn on the job and provide the right set of incentives in the workplace for learning to happen on a continuous basis. That to be able to actually take advantage of the new technologies, we must encourage our youth to self-direct learning. That is, you have to do a lot of the work yourself and a lot of the learning. You should be guided with practical and on-demand tools to help you learn throughout your career. So learning should be a continuous process. And then that there should be intermediation and information that connects workers, employers, training providers for better service platforms and also for mobility of platforms. So I want to now move to the panelists. And of course, first of all, to our host, Professor Gomez. My first question is to you. So I'll ask a question, but you also can feel free to make comments around the presentation that you have presented. Professor Gomez, with persistent gaps between education systems and labor market needs, what reforms are you prioritizing to close the skills gap and prepare your workforce for digital and green transitions?
Thank you very much, Mara. Thank you for giving me the floor, and want to thank Christian. I think he said it all, and I don't want to break the protocol. I will say that my job is done, and Christian has already said the whole rule. Yeah, it is very, very important. He talked about the foundational learning, but beyond data, the foundational learning is getting this necessary skill set to be able to address the job market as he clearly highlighted. To do that, what is the minimum? And there is need to, from our perspective, promote digital first curriculum reform, because at the end of the day, we cannot be using the same curriculum that we had in 1960s, 1965, for some of us. The curriculum must be hands-on, functional education. Our youth must be able to come out from our tertiary and higher education institutions, be able to really do the job. The worst thing to happen to universities and to their sectors is for their students to come out and go to the job market and be retrained. What a time wasted. What were they doing when they were in your TVET centers and universities? So there's a need to really look at that curriculum, but that curriculum is not just like, say, okay, like the revolutionaries will say, we need to decolonize the curriculum. After saying that, what are we saying? Now the new norm is digital. So how are we incorporating e-tech within our education system? It is very, very important. By embedding coding, by embedding AI, the jobs of tomorrow are AI related. So if we do not want to be excluded to what is going to happen, and it has already started happening, and even that something that will help us fast track our work, is need to be linked to AI. We need to also pay attention to data science and cybersecurity across all tertiary and higher education programs to facilitate digital competencies of the trainees. Without these, it's difficult for us to be able to enter the labor market with the necessary targets that we expect to have. As part of the Gambia National Qualification Framework, institutionalize renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and climate smart construction as core courses in tertiary and higher education institutions. We need to adapt, we need to adjust, we need to really see how to link the classroom with the real world, and also to introduce a national internship and apprenticeship policy. Interestingly, we do not have that. Well, for all other countries, this might be something really bizarre, but for us, it is very bold on the 14th of this month. We will be coming here to now validate that policy, national internship policy. But also, we working on also apprenticeship policy with binding commitments from employers, and in addition, ensuring apprenticeships are co-financed by government and industry to facilitate hands-on experience for trainees. We are also coming up with a policy on the percentage when it comes to the pedagoggy component, where the 70% of the training will be more hands-on, only 30% theory, so that at the end of the day, people really have the experience, they can fix the issues that we are looking for, especially on TVET. To introduce also teaching factory model to enhance experiential learning by embedding production units within universities and TVET centers, where students innovate in real-world settings based on industry demand. You cannot preach what you are not practicing. You are training students to be able to get the skill set and later go to the job market and work or create jobs. But you yourself, the university, the TVET center, you are not doing that. What we are saying is the teaching factory model will be to, like what happens in some other countries, is to encourage these institutions to have these companies within the university. They start the business aspect of it. There and then, both the students and the lecturers will use the opportunity to do the practice there and not waiting to leave the university or the TVET center and start practicing that. That private sector model needs to be infused within our system, in our TVET centers and universities. Then there's need also to strengthen impact-driven financing by linking funding from the National Research and Innovation Fund, because we came up with the tripartite fund. Then also the Tertiary and Higher Education Trust Fund, the TED Fund, and the Skills, Innovation and Entrepreneurship Fund, SIA Fund, thanks to the World Bank. That helped us for the first time to have these three windows with the SIA Fund. Window one to be supporting the TVET centers on building some structures and classrooms, labs, and also buying some teaching and learning materials. Window two to help the students to get some help for their stipend and scholarships so that they have access to these facilities, especially on TVET. Then also window three is the startups, those who have good ideas, good proposals, so that they are funded through that. So this is something that will be very, very helpful. The other one will be scaling the students' revolving loan scheme towards wider access and equity. Because most of the time, some say, I want to do it, but I don't have the funds. My parents cannot afford it. But with the student revolving loan scheme, you are given the opportunity to come forward and be supported. Later, when you are done, 1 year after, you start paying, and what you are paying, and plus government's intervention, that will help to support your brothers and sisters.
Thank you very much. Maybe a minute to round up. Thank you very much. Professor Gomez, we know you've done a lot, a revolution in Gambia, in the education system, especially the tertiary education level. You now have from one university, you have four. You have the University for Education, one for Agriculture, one for Public Service, and the University of Gambia. So congratulations, you've done very well. And I wanted to have you address in the second round what you're doing to train teachers, because that's a very important input for quality control. But first, we will go next to Minister Yusuf, Minister of Finance, Rwanda. And I know for ministers of finance, it's always a struggle trying to decide where the funds go to. Education is important, so is health, so is security, so is agriculture. And for that matter, the fact is resources are always limited. So I did hear you say that they have to make a case. They have to defend why they need more money. But the question I have for you this morning is, how can the IMF and the World Bank better support countries in expanding fiscal space and financing for education, skills, workforce development without compromising debt sustainability?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Diana. I would say that education is one of the most important sectors for any country, if not the most important. And even if it is very important, still because resources are scarce, the education sector has to make a strong case why we are giving education resources. Because it's not enough to only allocate resources. It's also important that the resources allocated are properly used and we see the outcomes that we want to see. Now, looking back, the last 10 years, the last 20 years, the last 30 years in Rwanda, but I'm sure this applies also to other countries, especially in Africa. We see a pattern. We see a pattern in education policy. We see a pattern in investment in education. We see a pattern in programming that has led to what we see at the moment in terms of outcomes. First of all, we see a lot of focus. We see a lot of focus in foundational education or general education. And we see less focus on the skills that we want to see. In the last many years, in almost all our countries, we see students go through the education system in a general sense. By the time they conclude, we don't see the skills that we need to see on the market. Two, we see a lot of focus in expanding enrollment. We see a lot of push to expand enrollment in primary education. We see a lot of push to push it through secondary education, and it's going through all the way to tertiary education. Along the way, creating a lot of stress in the education system. It is good to expand enrollment, including pre-primary education. We are seeing a lot of push to expand enrollment. We don't see good effort or focus to increase quality of education. We also see, in terms of policy and engagement, the need to train skills for the far future. I want to call it for the far future. Every time we see engagement in our context, we are trying to train for skills for the future. This is very common in almost all engagements that we see. But we see a lack of focus on skills that we need now for the opportunities that exist now. So we know there's a lot of opportunities. For example, in most of our countries, we know there's a lot of opportunities in agriculture. And these are the opportunities that are available now. We don't see focus in building the skills for the opportunities in agriculture. Don't add anything. We have opportunities in construction that are now, we don't see that once. We see, we have opportunities in environment conservation. We see in very many areas, we see a lot of opportunities in areas where our education systems don't focus to build those skills. We see a struggle in financing. At national level, from national resources, we see struggle in adequate financing. We see the partners that we have, the World Bank and other partners, the resources are not adequate to invest in education. So this is a call for all our partners to increase the resources. We need a lot of resources. And because of lack of resources, then we see a struggle to balance between short-term needs, medium-term needs in terms of educational skills, and long-term needs. And the default has always been the basic which is long-term. You start investing pre-primary education, primary education, you see results 20, 30 years down the road. Meanwhile, you're missing opportunities that have returns now. Now, the reason that is happening is we are seeing education as a channel, as a social channel to pass through. Every kid is born, there's a channel that's supposed to pass through. Education mainly considered as a social program and not as a means to facilitate the economic dimension of our country. So then I'll stop at that now. That we need to shift. We need to shift away from what we've seen in the last 10, 20, 30 years and be deliberate going forward. We need to map. We need to map the needs in terms of skills that we need that are immediate. We need to map the needs that we have that are medium term, 3 to 5 years. We've done a lot of work in that area. For example, we know we need a very huge health workforce. And we know we can deliver that in the next 3 to 5 years. So if we deliver it, you can see results in the next 3 to 5 years. We are trying to put in a lot of effort. We see that in health, we see that in programming and coding. We put in place a high school program in coding, where children conclude high school very competent in coding, so that they can support almost all our institutions in terms of putting in place systems that work, and they can continue to university education, but also contributing at the same time. So we need to be very deliberate with that. We need resources, a lot of resources. We need our partners to be flexible. First of all, putting in resources at scale, but also in a flexible way that allows implementation of the projects that we want to implement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mr. Yusuf. You've said a lot, very good points, and you placed emphasis on what we are focusing on, but more on what we are not focusing on. And the consequences of that are things that the World Bank and the IMF should be called upon to support us to make an assessment. Oftentimes, we don't see education as an economic, a very vital economic input, because we need the skills to be able to have the right type of workforces that are required for the future. But you also said that we're missing the opportunity of training or concentrating on providing the skills that are required now in agriculture, which is big. For the World Bank, agriculture is a big program. We have the Agri-Connect program, but how many specialists do we have in agriculture? How many countries actually do analysis of the weather to be able to have programs that support the farmers, whether it is on quality of seeds or the quality of the soil? So we're missing, you're right, we're missing that opportunity, and we need to bring it forward. But we also have here with us today a specialist in training in education, And perhaps some of these issues you can address. But Mr. Yusuf, when we come back to you, I want you to talk to us about the opportunities that our children are missing. You have, we have standard exams in West Africa, we have the West African exam for WAEC. In Nigeria, we have a JAM. So you see a kid that has done well, but because of the number of spaces in a medical school, only a certain number are admitted. And most other kids are now sent to do other courses which they didn't want to do. There's a huge opportunity that we're missing, and that happens every year, every admission cycle. What can we do to address that? We'll come back to you on that. But let me now move on to the Executive Secretary of African Capacity Building Foundation, Mr. Momodu. The question I have for you is what concrete steps are needed to ensure that investments in education, particularly in tailored and higher education, translate into employable skills for to meet industry demand?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the organizers and our host for this CAUCUS, which is very well organized, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be able to share our views on this very important document. We, ACPF has a very direct linkage with what you say, the question, because at ACPF we are in the upskilling and reskilling business. So this means that we work to help professionals who are already in jobs to either adapt their skills, fill gaps, or actually support them in acquiring skills that allow them to pivot to the other jobs. So this in some ways actually is addressing the gaps left by the question you talked about, but also is addressing the new emerging needs. It doesn't mean that the initial training is going to have you set up for the whole trajectory of your career. But to make sure that the skills that are being provided in the education in tertiary and secondary actually much, it is very important actually to look at labor markets demand. And when we want to really build employment-ready workforce, it is important actually to have prospective analysis of what type of jobs are required. And this means curricula being developed together with employers, which is private sector. But it is also actually having a prospective view about what does the future of jobs look like. Because you have new technologies, new demands coming in, and these are constantly changing also the type of skills that will be required. So to ensure that the product of people being graduated by universities, training schools, etc., actually meet the demand, two things: prospective research, constant analysis of labor markets understanding, but also partnership with employers to ensure that we are actually training for the right skills that can be employed. And one of the things that I would also add from my own experience is the fact also that oftentimes systems do not train for the type of skills actually employers cannot train. When we talk about this puts emphasis on the other skills, the skills other than technical skills. Oftentimes, employers do not have a challenge training or improving the skills of employees, particularly from a technical perspective. What they cannot train for is actually what we call soft and life skills, which unfortunately are not present in our education system. So this also needs to be taken into account as we look at reforms of curricula and these educating systems. And lastly, what I would say is that how do you integrate, because the model of really being trained for your first 20 years, 25 years of life, and then work for the rest of it is a bit something that is of the past. So today, the agility of learning and continuing life learning is also extremely important, because the idea is not just to ensure that graduates or workforce that we produce meet the current needs of the labor market, but it is also ensuring that they remain relevant and can be upskilled to reskilled over time. So those are the contributions.
Thank you very much, Omolu. One thing that got my attention to what you said is that we are not training for soft and life skills. And I wonder how that can be done. So please hold that thought while we come back to you. I don't know how we're doing with time, but I wanted to just have the panelists make 1 minute interventions and then we'll go to the doctors. But I have a question for our presenter also. Mr. Christian, let me ask, what kind of tools or new tools do you think that the bank and the fund need to deploy to be able to meet better the demands of clients?
Thank you very much. I really like this conversation because it's focused on what matters, on learning and making sure that kids are not just going through the education system because they're going through the education system with a focus on acquiring the skills that are needed in the labor market. But there's a conversation about what are the jobs today and how can we make sure that the big investments that are happening across the continent have skills embedded from the get-go, and what are the approaches that are needed. I think from my perspective, looking at this, there are two things that we can put forward. First of all, we're in this to make sure that the big investment pushers in agriculture through AgriConnect on expanding electricity access and the green energy transition, the big push on tourism, that it results in jobs, for people who have the skills to do those jobs. Because you can create a job, if you don't have the people with the skills for those jobs, it's meaningless, right? So that's why it's important to think about skilling from the get-go. So I think what we can put forward is an approach from the World Bank side to come up with a solution to embed skilling in the big investments across different sectors. That we can look at the ways of bringing the private sector into this more. Because we're approaching this, we're thinking about this not just in a pure public sector sense. We're thinking about what are the regulations, the reforms that are needed to get the private sector to come in. Because how can we create markets? Because there are markets there for skilling. And so what does it take to get the private sector in? How can we deploy the IFC, and how can we deploy Omega to de-risk investments in the skilling sector and make sure that there are more providers that are geared to the demand from industry. So having the operational tools to make sure that skilling for the jobs of today are part of the conversation from the get-go. In turn, we, I think, require leadership from the side of, especially ministers of finance, to say, okay, well, let's think this together from the get-go. let's not think of this as an education and skills engagement and an agriculture or an energy engagement. Let's put this together. It requires that leadership from the side of ministers of finance as well. Now, as an enabler of that, I think we're making an investment in deploying an analytical tool that allows us to assess the occupations and the likely labor demand across industries, across sectors, across value chains. Right? So take tourism, for example. The tourism jobs are not just the hotel managers and the kind of, the jobs in managing large resorts. Tourism jobs go all along the value chain, down to the person who cooks lunch on the beach in the informal sector. Right? And so, what are the different occupations and what are the skilling needs and the entry points in terms of the pathways that we need to deploy? So that's a tool that we are developing, we're deploying to make sure that the skilling solutions that get mobilized are truly demand-led. So knowledge and analysis that we can put forward, and then operational tools that embed skilling in the big investments. And that's kind of focused on delivering on the jobs today, given the large numbers of people who are in the labor market and who are looking for opportunities in today's labor market.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I think in view of time, first of all, we'll go around and get comments and questions from governors. And then, when you respond to the governors, you now respond to the questions that I left you with in the last round. So, governors, excellencies, any comments, advice, guidance, questions from you? Okay, I don't see an indication at this time, but as we go on, okay, see somebody, Harold. Harold at the back, and I say, okay, Somalia.
Yeah, thank you very much, panelists members, for this very interesting topic. Discuss. I think it was deserving more time to go more into details to share the experience. My question is framed around, looking forward, despite all these challenges that the professor and the minister and all others highlighted across Africa. As we prepare the young population for future work, it's very evident that there is a growing mismatch between the skills taught and the skills demanded by the market. So in fragile states like Somalia, is there any initiatives that can be, regional initiatives that can be framed across, addressing these gaps, which is not taking more time, long time. We are discussing now about integrating it to the curriculum, starting from the education, starting from the child education. That's very nice, but something that can be achieved in the short term, that can be linked to the pressing jobs in the market as we speak now. Yesterday, Dangote has been talking about industrialization and the role of industrialization in terms of shifting, paradigm shift for growth, for economic growth and job creation. So my question to you is, what could be the frameworks that can be financed, which is short to medium term, that can be applicable to the country, fragile and conflict affected countries like Somalia, which is already been facing educational challenges and also fiscal space, constrained fiscal space. I'm thinking about the concessional sort of financing and digital development and stuff like that. So what would be your thought towards that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Somalia. I see DR Congo.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, pour la parole. Je voudrais féliciter tous les présentateurs, les honorables présentateurs, pour la qualité de l'air. la qualité de leur présentation et la pertinence des éléments d'information nous apportés. Ce secteur est un secteur éminemment important en raison des incidences sur toutes les catégories de la gestion de la gouvernance de nos pays. Si on remarque dans l'expérience du pays d'Extrême-Orient, la Chine, le Japon, nous remarquons que les politiques d'éducation ont apporté une contribution éminemment importante dans le développement et l'accroissage économique. Et si je voulais revenir sur un maxime de Confucius qui disait pour planter un grain et faire des plans de développement pour un mois, il faut planter un grain. Pour faire des plans de développement pour 10 ans, il faut planter un arbre. Et pour les plans de développement de 100 ans, il faut bien enseigner les peuples. Et donc, à cela, je veux faire remarquer aussi que tous ceux qui sont dans la salle, tous les honorables participants, ne seraient jamais à cette conférence s'ils n'avaient pas reçu une éducation ou une formation appropriée et permettant justement de pouvoir décider sur le sort des millions de personnes dans nos pays à travers le monde. Donc, ce qui montre que la question de l'éducation est une question centrale, au même niveau que la question de l'infrastructure que nous avons débattue hier, et qui devrait être considérée dans toutes ces dimensions. Cela peut nous émettre quelques réflexions et préoccupations, notamment en ce qui concerne la stabilité des moyens de financement. Comment la Banque mondiale, cela s'adresserait notamment à M. Christian, la Banque mondiale peut aider nos pays à bâtir des cadres de formation et d'éducation appropriés qui intègrent la dimension financement dans sa stabilité en faisant participer toutes les catégories d'outils disponibles, et notamment une partie de nos fonds souverains qui sont généralement affectés au financement des infrastructures. Donc, comment les faire participer également au financement de manière stable des programmes d'éducation. Notre préoccupation, c'est un rapport avec une bonne partie de nos populations en Afrique qui sont exclus du marché du travail pour ne pas avoir soit bénéficié des formations ou d'une éducation appropriée ou des conditions de vie leur permettant justement de pouvoir intégrer le marché du travail. Pour ces populations qui sont exposées soit au terrorisme, à la criminalité et aux sirènes des groupes armés, donc qui constitue un vivier pour les organisations marginales, il est important de pouvoir également développer des politiques et des stratégies appropriées sur le long terme pour pouvoir les absorber et éviter justement leur vulnérabilisation continue et leur exposition aux sirènes des groupes armés et d'autres groupes marginaux. Les cas de la Suisse et du Japon également méritaient notre attention par rapport à cette éducation.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister here. Thank you very much. I've just been told that we have less than 5 minutes, so we'll come back to the panelists and starting from Minister Gomez. Please just respond to any of the points that have been raised. Morocco, can you do it like in half minutes? Just very quick.
Thank you very much. I think this topic is very important for Africa, but let me share with you my view about this topic. I think that two requirements must be satisfied to address this factor. I think that the public finance management is an essential condition to because finally we must finance these expenditures because we must have fiscal financial resources to finance this reform. The second requirement we can finance this select human capital, but we can't do that without deploying and integrating the reform. An integrated reform can happen the generalization of social possession in order to enhance living capacity of population. In Morocco, this reform was based upon the establishment of unified social registry designed to target the most vulnerable population. I think this condition is very important to have to reach goals, and finally I think it's necessary to have these two requirements. Public finance management must have debt, fiscal deficits, and debt to mobilize more fiscal space to finance this reform.
Okay, thank you very much, Morocco, for that contribution. So I now come back to the panel and I'll start in the reverse order. With you, Mr. Mo, you will have 1 minute each to either respond to the points that have been made or just say if you find out what's your call to action.
I will go with a call to action, and which I believe that is extremely important in terms of how do we recognize the universal right or the right to access to education, and how are we balancing it with the outcomes and the investment. So to me, I think it will, one of the very important reforms to be undertaken is how fund financing for education can be tied specifically to outcome, performance outcomes in terms of attending and learning measured concretely. This is where I think that there is a big gap. So education like agriculture and others are just sectors where we feel we are obligated to pour money, but not necessarily expecting concrete outcomes and objectives. So there should be a business case for that. Thank you.
Minister Yusuf.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have what I would call a last mile dilemma in the education system, but skill. Many young people, as they conclude their general education, getting out of the education system, the last part is never handled adequately to skill them to be able to be useful to the labor market. It could be TVET, it could be technical vocational education, it doesn't have to be university. So either at TVET level or at university level, we see inadequacy in terms of programs available to skill these young people, and the funding available is not also adequate. So we need to address those things.
Very much, Mr. Yusuf. Kristen?
So maybe let me make 2 points. One is to get us back to the outlook. We're looking at a world that is going to change fundamentally over the next decade. The next decade is unlike the previous decade. Technology is going to disrupt any labor market, and fundamentally so. So how do we prepare the next generation for that labor market? And how do we make sure, in particular, the most vulnerable settings? So I'm thinking about Somalia. I'm thinking about fragile and conflict-affected settings. How do we equip that next generation in the best possible way? And so that's why getting back to the foundations and those 9 and 10-year-olds who struggle to make sense of the basic text. That ought to be our number one wake-up call. This is the thing that needs focus. The focus from schooling to a focus on learning. And deploying the different sets of tools that are there. I mean, the minister from Morocco mentioned the importance of social protection, of actually making sure that kids have the means to go to school and the means to learn. So it requires multiple entry points to deliver learning. It's not just the inputs into that very school, but that is really the focus, because in the future, the learning that we are going to do for the jobs that are there next year, in 5 years, 10 years, may be very different. That may look very, very different. Higher education may look very, very different. There's going to be new forms of learning, platforms, digital platforms that are at the disposal. And so that brings me to my second point. The primary responsibility for those foundations are the public sector, liable taxpayers' money. And think when it comes to TVET, when it comes to scaling for jobs, when it comes to on-the-job learning, there is a lot more that the private sector can do. And so thinking about how using fiscal incentives and others to get the private
Thank you,
sector.
Chris, and thank you very much for your intervention. Final word, Minister Gomez, final word.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there are two issues maybe that I want to share. One would be for a paradigm shift in the way we fund education in general, from ECD to university, looking at it as a continuum, but not a sectoral aspect of it, because for a long time in many African countries, the Gambia included that higher education has been look at it, they have been treated differently, and there's need to really see how best we can come up with a special funding package for a real project on higher education for economic transformation. Because these are the doctors, the agriculturists, and all those people, and the engineers are coming from higher education. Missing that point, we will have issues on sustainable development, because the road network, the bridges and all these are engineers. If you don't train that, it will be a problem. For the Gambia, for instance, just last year, in June, and this year, that's the time we started producing homegrown engineers after 61 years of independence. So then there's a problem of our development. If you're having a technical problem, the solution is a system of containment, using the youth issue that Christian talked about, but by giving them the necessary skill sets to stay in their own backyards and build their nation. Last but not least is now looking at initial training of teachers. The foundational learning challenges that we are having in many of our countries, you cannot have that if you do not train the teachers. It's like a computer, garbage in, garbage out. If you do not have well-trained teachers, then you will not have very good students, and you cannot give what you don't have. So these two interventions, I think, might be one of the key elements that will help support sustainable development in Africa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Even though that was supposed to be the final word, but there is another final word from the chair of the CAUCUS.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator and the panelists. I'm intrigued by the presentation of Christian, and I took a quick dash at the website. And I was surprised to see that education accounts for 188 out of the 325 in the human capital potential. So that really, as a finance minister, gives me a pretty food for thought, because it accounts for more than 57% of the total human capital potential. And how can the bank help us now give that to that target? When I look at the scale, Gambia is 114 out of 325. And most of sub-Saharan African countries are way below, less than even 150. So it's a warning call. How can we work with the bank to upscale our human capital scopes and potential? Thank you. I'm sorry, but I was really intrigued by the results. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad that the minister, and I'm sure other colleagues are also checking that out to see where we are placing our countries. But colleagues, distinguished participants, honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to give a round of applause for our panelists.
Madam Moderator and the entire panel, if you could kindly stand, the photographers want to have one good photo of all of you. I think, Madam Moderator, you'll be in the middle, sandwiched by two men on each side. Will be, I think. The photographers, let me know, please. If you could kindly move a bit to the right, it's a. This is good.
Yang mua của yang mua quyền xe yang mua quyền xe tiền em đi xe
Thank you so much. Thank you. A great way of starting the morning. I'm told the next session is closed. Therefore, media, invited guests, you would have to excuse the group here, myself inclusive, to be able to deliberate and come together to get a memorandum done for the African caucus. So that means guests, media, photographers, camera people will have to leave the room for the next hour and change for the next session.
Saturday.
We're hoping the session will not last longer than 90 minutes, when all of us will be allowed to come back.
Get it.